Cement. Make sure to hold your breath. Once you reach the bottom, a fight way worse than death. Cement.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to break this down and let's get straight into it. So first things first, this is the script we ended up with. Ignore this section here. This was a really quick and dirty trailer variant. This is the actual effect itself. It's pretty big, but it's also pretty simple. There's nothing like, you know, apart from the particle simulation, there's nothing crazy difficult here. This is the plate that I was given, and I was also given this plate here. So this right here is actually a 3D animation out of Maya that the director Part-Time Seagull did, and it's actually pretty cool because it is 3D, but if we play it, it might be a little bit sluggish to play. But it has a pretty convincing 2D look, and that's all thanks to some fancy shader that he had in Maya. I'm not as familiar with Maya, especially not Maya shaders, so I don't exactly know what this is, but I thought it looked really cool, so I just wanted to give that a bit of a highlight. But yeah, so those were the two elements that I was given. So it was that, and then this was the plate. Now obviously the whole point is that it needs to be underwater, but there are actually quite a few changes that I made to this shot to bring it to where it is, and they weren't exactly like in the brief, but as I always say, part of your job as a compositor is to think of what the director would like rather than what they're actually asking you to do. A lot of the time, especially, you know, in compositing, directors, you know, they might know what they want. They don't necessarily know like exactly how they want it, if that makes sense. And this was a case of that, where in Part-Time Seagull, he knew what he wanted. He wanted it to look like it was underwater, he wanted it to look grimy and murky, and he gave us a reference of night vision photography things. It's hard to explain, but I'll chuck one up on the screen now. And so he knew what he wanted, but like I said, there were a few things that I changed that deviated from the original plate that I was given that actually ended up, you know, for the better. He liked them more, and, you know, he left them in, and that became the intention of the shot. Up here we have the matte, which I've already gone over how Glitch does their matte process to separate characters and stuff, so I'm not going to go over that right now. And then we have the bubble simulation for Jack as he's sinking. Now I'm not going to go too in depth into this, but it is pretty simple. It's just a card that I manually keyframe to be in the rough position of Jack's mouth in 2D space. Well, 3D space technically, but like I made sure it lined up in 2D space. And then I just used this, which was a bubble asset from the pre-production stage. It was actually a concept bubble asset that wasn't used in anything else, I don't think. But regardless of all that, I thought it would be perfect for this underwater sequence, so we ended up using that. And so that obviously becomes the particle. Now we have a lot of stuff going on here, but I don't even remember what half of this stuff is. Like this 0.03, I don't even remember what that is. That's just me writing down thoughts as I go. But basically, all in all, it comes through here, and then I chuck a distort on to give it sort of the warping effect like it's going through the waves. But let's get into the actual comp. So that was all the pre-production sort of stuff, I guess. So we have the plate, obviously, and then I just did some preliminary color corrections. I say preliminary, I didn't really do it till a while into the comp because it was messing with the colors of the glows and stuff like that, which I will probably point out later on. But yeah, so this was just a very simple tint to make this all this green color, and then I just rotated a really soft shape around it just to make sure it wasn't affecting Jack, because I didn't want it to affect him at all. I just wanted it to affect the car, and obviously a little bit of this, as you can see, but I wanted to leave this center point as unchanged as possible. Now this is when I did already start to deviate from the original intention, because the original intention had these guys just sort of like an overlay on top of the screen, There wasn't really any depth to it. It was kind of just stuck on top, and then it was going to be this behind it, or not that, this more so, behind it with maybe like some bubbles and stuff. But I really wanted to add as much depth as possible and as much complexity to the shot as possible. So I went for this composition of obviously center focused because it's a very symmetrical shot, but I wanted to play with the light and really make it seem like he was falling from grace, I guess is a good way to put it, because from top to bottom, which we'll see in a second, the shot goes from really bright to really dark, and we have these super ominous figures dancing around him and stuff, and I really wanted to make it look scary and like he was just falling into hopelessness basically. And then as we go through, we have the haze of the water, which is fairly simple. So this is basically just removing the bright points of the car, because I'll show you the end result. As you can see, it's just blurred out, tinted, graded, all that sort of stuff. But if I left those highlights in there, we ended up with this, which looked really weird. Even though it technically might be accurate because the light would be scattering, especially from a bright light source like that, it just didn't look good in the final result. So let's actually have a look at it here. So as you can see, it just has a really weird look to it and kind of makes it stand out more than I wanted it to. So I just made sure that was removed, and then obviously we just have a bunch of grades here. As you can see, without the blur, it looks really weird. But yeah, that's just especially with the tint. Yeah, there's basically nothing without the tint. But then that's just plussed over, as you can see, and that adds the first layer of this kind of murkiness to the water. So this depth fall off here it's just a ramp doing a grade, which I believe is just set. Basically set the gain to 0. And that's kind of playing into that idea of falling from grace. It's really bright at the top, almost pitch black at the bottom. And this is the first shot where we see the cementing process happening, so I didn't want it to be too drastic. But especially when you get to later shots in the sequences, I really, really dialed up that the darkness, and so it really looked like he was just falling into absolutely nothing, and that's really what I wanted to go for with the sequence. Next, we have the characters being integrated in. This was the original intention. They were just meant to be stuck on top. As you can see, they're in front of the car here, and obviously if we scrub forward, he'll be in front of Jack as well. If they ever actually go behind. Okay, apparently they avoid Jack at all costs. There we go. Yeah, so as you can see, it was meant to be fully in front of them, but that didn't really stick out to me. That didn't, I don't know, something about that didn't feel right. So what I did was I actually separated Jack and the car. And so, that's just them here. We've got the bubble simulation, we've got the car, we've got Jack here. So that's them separated, and the reason I did that is because then we could have this. Now, the intention behind this was, pretty clear, I feel, and that's just, I really wanted it to feel like he was being surrounded by these figures, and, in the final result, I feel like they really do come across as these ominous, looming sort of ghosts or ghouls, which was, actually sort of a vibe that I wanted to go for, was like this ghoulish sort of spookiness to it all. And this was also playing on that reference of the night vision underwater photography, really playing up that eeriness and the scariness of it all. Now I feel like I personally had a bit of an advantage when it came to conveying that effect, because not only have I worked on projects like Nautilus, which are primarily underwater, at least the sequences I did, but I also have a huge case of thalassophobia. It's really, really bad. So I kind of just worked on this until it started scaring me. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's it. That's cool. And so that's really what I wanted to go for. I kind of just thought, okay, what would absolutely freak me out? And the thought of just falling into this dark pit, all these giant figures with that are just silhouetted with the glowing eyes just circle you, that terrified me. And I was like, okay, I have to go for that. And I think it paid off in the end. That was the way the director wanted to take it. And yeah, it was ended up being a really, really good choice. So I just added the haze over the plate to make sure it matched. Did some more grading and stuff. It looks ugly without being cut out. Copied the matte in, pre-melted it, just the usual stuff. And then I took the bubble sim, added a tint to it to make it blend a little bit more with the world. And then I added this frame hold. A neat trick that I actually learned on this project is with the frame hold, you can do this increment value, and as you can see, it's set to 3, and that actually creates stepped animation, which is very useful because 99% of the shots on Gaslight District are stepped animation. So whenever we had an element that we needed to add in that was animated on ones, like a smoke element or these bubbles, for example, which were a custom element, but they were made on ones because that's how the particle simulations work, I just chuck in this frame hold, set the increment to 3, and suddenly it's animated on 3s. So it's actually animating every 3 frames. So as you can see, it's looking quite different. And then if we put that on 3s, we get that really stepped, sort of stop motion-y sort of look. And that's the key to a lot of this stuff, really, is the stepped animation really sold that stop motion effect. And I've seen a lot of people comment on that in the episode. They say, oh, how cool is the stop motion effect, stuff like that, and it really is just as simple as that. It's just animating it on 2s or 3s, and there you go, you're good to go. And so this was actually a lifesaver in a lot of our shots. Now we're still not quite hitting the look that we wanted. As you can see, we've got some really deep blacks that aren't really matching and all that sort of stuff, but we'll get there eventually, don't you worry. This is where I really pushed that fall from grace intention, and kind of made this sort of angelic sort of feeling with the light rays here. So as you can see, I've got this one big spotlight shooting down, and kind of treating that as like just a direct tunnel to nothing. And I think that does a lot to really segment that center section just by itself. But then when we add these, which is just more of the general atmospheric light rays, that you would see, like the caustics in water and stuff like that. Now this is where we start to feel that depth of the water and feel like it actually is like a solid object. Well, not solid, liquid, but you know what I mean. These effects in and of themselves are very simple. So all this is a constant, copying in a roto shape. I did grade it a little bit. You shouldn't really be doing this. I guess it's not the worst habit to get into, but it was more so I just wanted to game down this just slightly to see what the color looked like, rather than editing the constant and then accidentally losing this exact color value or whatever. So this isn't the worst habit to get into, but I did it anyway. But then I pre-multed it. As you can see, this is the difference in the light rays, and then just merge that over the top. And then this right here is quite literally just a constant with the volume raise node, the center of which is really far up, and then plussed over the top, and then all of a sudden we are left with this, which as you can see adds a lot of depth and really helps with the composition of the shot. Now straight after this we have the shadow projection, which is not really a projection, I guess that's the wrong word for it. What I also meant by shadow projection is the volumetric shadows. That's really what I should have called it. And this is like the gaps where the light isn't going past the car or isn't going past Jack, and so we're getting those gaps in the light rays here. And again, that's very simple. That's just a really dark green constant. Bit of a grade here. There was just some blending issues with some color differences and stuff like that, so that's all that is. And then most of the effect just comes in through this, which is a big roto shape for the car shadow with the car being stenciled out of it. It's not neat by any means, but it got the job done, so that was all we really needed. And then this one here is just the matte, Jack isolated, bit of a transform to get it in place, and then a mainly vertical blur with some horizontal chucked in there. Combine those together, we end up with this. Copy that into the constant, get rid of it, and then we end up with this. So again, it's not really a projection. That was the wrong word to use, but it was more of a volumetric shadow. And then when that's put over the top at a decently low opacity, it gives that effect of blocking the light rays. Now the next thing here is kind of pushing that angelic look that I mentioned before. I really liked the way this looked, but I thought we could really sell him a little bit better. So I added this targeted bloom, which is really just to show like the brightness of the light that is hitting him. to really kind of contrast with the darkness, like literally just on him. You look at the top of his body and the light that's hitting him, and that is so bright that it's literally blooming out. You know, it's scattering through the water, but then directly underneath him is just pure black. There is nothing. So this is my Expo Glow node, which I will never stop pushing, but this is what we ended up with. And this is why I made this green. Now, if we quickly come up here and disable this color correction here, as you can see, that makes it more of this orange, which technically is what we ended up with in the end kind of anyway, but it was just a little bit too orange and it matched this a little bit too much, so that's why we introduced this green. You'll see it's semi-redundant, which we'll see in a second. We come through here, we have this color correction, so we're going from this color here, from the Expo Glow, we're tinting it this color here, and then I also break it off and tint it this color here. And then when we key mix those together, that's what we ended up with. Then a little bit of a grey just to darken it down ever so slightly. This was, you know, through some notes from the director, things were just a little bit too much. The first version I had of this was extremely murky, like you couldn't even see the background. So it was dialed back quite a bit in the final result. But that's what all these random grades and stuff are. And so as you can see, that adds a huge amount to the shot. So it brings back these headlights, firstly, which are looking very gross without this, and it makes this light beam make sense that was in the plate. But it also, it gives him this sort of ethereal glow that I really wanted. And by doing that, sells this light ray even more. So we're nearing the end. It's still not quite as good as it could be. As you can see, things are looking still a little bit cut out, and this is where like the smallest touch made so much of a difference. It was actually kind of crazy. I wanted to sell the ghoul effect, as you can see. That's what I literally called it, ghoul. And what this is it's the figures firstly by themselves, and I'm keying them so it is just the highlights, as you can see, and then I'm adding this Expo Glow, which really bumps up that haziness and makes their eyes and everything look so ominous. I'm also including this mask because otherwise, when we look at how this looks over the top, we get this weirdness here, which I didn't want. So include that input mask and we're good to go. It really does just add that final touch of eeriness, and it makes it look so murky and so weird and just really creepy overall, and you know, really stops it from looking like cartoonish, I guess, because a lot of the style of this show is obviously meant to be 2D and drawn and very cartoonish, you know, not in a bad way, very cartoonish, and I wanted to stray away from that just for this because it was just such a striking shot. I really wanted to, you know, really push the volumetrics and push the eeriness and the, you know, give it this whole, I keep repeating myself, but this whole like ethereal nature. And I think that this last little bit was really the final touches that it needed, and it really added so much to it. And then the final touches were just some chromatic aberration. I pushed it pretty far because, you know, underwater light scatters differently and you do get quite a lot of chromatic aberration underwater. So I wanted to push that, and it also helps these edges blend in a little bit more and really remove that 2D cartoonish look, and we ended up with this. So I think this turned out great. I love chromatic aberration. It's by far my favorite lens effect. I feel like I've said that so many times. And then we just add that crop just to get rid of those you know, ugly areas, and there we have it. That is the final shot. So that is how we went from this to this. But I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown and a little peek into what actually goes into a shot like this and how I achieve this sort of, you know, underwater ghoulish effect. If you want to recreate it, feel free to ask any questions in the comments, or if you just want me to clarify anything, or you know, maybe you're just interested in learning a bit more, feel free to ask anything in the comments and I will surely get back to you. But other than that, hope you guys enjoyed, hope you guys learned something, and I will see you next time.